Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're actually doing something, well, a little different than our usual material. Usually when we have a stack of papers about relationships or marriage, we're looking at modern psychology, communication styles, maybe the 5 love languages, how to navigate the modern partnership.
Right, like how to argue better, how to listen, how to make sure everyone feels heard, the standard relationship advice you'd expect today.
Exactly. But the document we are opening up today is effectively the antimatter to all of that. We're looking at a text called The Righteous Wife, or in Arabic, Sifāt Zawjatus-Sālihah. It's written by Muhammad Shuman. And I want to be very clear right off the bat, this is going to challenge a lot of modern sensibilities. It might even upset you.
Yeah, that is putting it mildly. This text is not a self-help book. It's a treatise. And it frames marriage not as a partnership between two equals building a life, but as a rigid, divinely ordained hierarchy. We are stepping into a world where order is the absolute highest good, and that order is maintained by a very strict chain of command.
A hierarchy that looks to modern eyes very much like a master-servant relationship. But before we judge it, we really need to understand it.
Or a master-captive relationship, honestly.
Right, well, we'll get to that specific word. So here is the mission for this deep dive. We are going to take an unfiltered look at this text. We aren't here to shout at it, and we aren't here to endorse it. We are just impartial reporters. We're going to walk through the specific theological arguments, the Quranic verses, and the Hadith citations that Shuman uses to build this worldview.
And it is a very specific worldview. Shuman is explicit in his introduction. He warns the reader right away that Western liberal choices are alien to Islam. He's setting the stage for a clash of civilizations before you even get to page 1. He knows his audience, and he definitely knows the opposition.
He's drawing a line in the sand. It's basically saying, everything you think you know about autonomy, just forget it. This is the ancient way.
He is. And our job is to analyze how this document's specific claims clash violently with modern concepts of female autonomy and human rights. We're going to expose the arguments and the evidence exactly as they appear on the page, because you can't really discuss this topic unless you know exactly what the primary sources say.
So let's get into the logic, because you can't understand the rules in this book without understanding how the players are defined. The text is built on a fundamental premise of authority. It leans heavily on the interpretation of Surah An-Nisa, chapter 4, verse 34.
This is the foundational verse for the entire traditional structure. If you take this verse away, the whole argument sort of collapses.
Right. So the text explains that men are qayyim. Now, in this translation and commentary, qayyim means they are in charge. They are the chiefs. But the text doesn't just say men are in charge because God said so. It offers a rationale. It tries to explain the natural order of why things are set up this way.
It does. I'm looking at the commentary here from Abdur Rahman As-Sadi. This is footnote 03 in the text. The logic is that men possess sound intellect, composure, patience, and endurance.
Which implies, by converse logic, that women don't possess those things, or at least not to the requisite level for leadership.
Exactly. The implication is that women are emotional, volatile, or perhaps just not sound enough to steer the ship.
And because the man has this sound intellect, and this is crucial because he is responsible for spending his money on the family, the text argues he earns the right to authority. From the traditionalist perspective Shuman is presenting, this isn't oppression, it's functionality. The man has the burden of leadership and provision, so he gets the authority to make the decisions to keep order. It's a trade-off.
That's the soft reading, though. He steers the ship. That sounds nice. It sounds like a captain and a first mate. It sounds like a division of labor. But we have to look at the specific language Shuman uses to define that authority. If you go back to that exact same footnote, the Sadi's commentary, it's jarring. It stops being about a captain and starts being about something else entirely.
You mean the captive line?
Yes. It explicitly states, and I am quoting directly here, the man is like a governor and master for his wife, and she is with him like a captive.
Like a captive.
And that word captive, awan, in the Arabic context, it's not some poetic term for someone who is captivated by love. It is a legal term. It refers to a prisoner of war.
That really stops you in your tracks. Because prisoner of war implies a total loss of autonomy. A prisoner of war doesn't have rights. They exist entirely at the mercy of the captor.
They do.
Oh.
And Shuman doesn't back away from that comparison at all. He doubles down. Later in the text, if you look at citation 69, he brings in commentary from Al-Kabair by At-Tahabi.
Oh, I have that right here. It says, the woman must also know that she is like a slave to her husband.
Like a slave. So we have captive and slave. These are the defining nouns for a wife in this text.
Okay, I want to play devil's advocate for a second here, just to try and understand the internal logic of the author. To a modern listener, slave and captive are trigger words that just shut down the conversation completely. But is the text arguing for a rigid social contract? Like, because the man bears the heavy burden of providing everything, the food, shelter, safety, clothing, the woman owes something in return. Is it transactional? Like, I bought your safety, so I own your time.
It is absolutely transactional, but the currency is her personhood. That's the friction here. The text argues he provides resources, so she provides unrestricted service. But when you use legal terms like captive regarding a wife in her own home, you are effectively saying she has no right to negotiate. A prisoner doesn't say, "I'm not really feeling like cooking tonight." A prisoner submits because they have no other choice.
So it redefines marriage from a union of souls to a transfer of ownership. He owns the provision, therefore he owns the recipient of that provision.
Precisely. And that definition of ownership brings us to the physical extremes of what this submission actually looks like. Because Schumann isn't satisfied with just abstract titles like governor. He wants to quantify the debt the wife owes. He wants to show the math.
And this brings us to what is, frankly, the most graphic part of the book. I call it the heavy hitter citation. When I first read this, I actually had to put the papers down for a second.
I know exactly which one you mean. It's the one everyone pauses on.
This is citation number 13. It's a hadith reported by Al-Bazar from Abu Sa'di al-Khudri. And I want to warn listeners, this is visceral. It's nasty.
Go ahead and read it. People need to hear the specific wording to understand the weight of the argument.
The text says, "The right of the husband over the wife is such that if he had a wound or his nostrils were pouring forth pus or blood, then she were to swallow that down, then she would still not have fulfilled his right."
I want to just let that hang there for a second. Pouring forth pus or blood, and she swallows that down.
It's stomach turning.
It is entirely designed to be.
And I want to actively encourage you, if you're listening to this and thinking, no way, they're making that up, go verify it. Look up citation 13 in The Righteous Wife by Muhammad Schumann. Dig into the primary source for yourself to understand the religious and historical weight being applied here.
But we have to ask why. Why use that specific, horrifying image? The author isn't suggesting a medical procedure. He isn't saying women should go around doing this literally.
No, it's a measuring stick. It's a hyperbolic comparison.
Exactly. It is a rhetorical device to demonstrate the insurmountable magnitude of the debt. The point the text is making is that even if you did that the most degrading, physically repulsive act imaginable, you still haven't balanced the books. You still owe him more.
That's the key, isn't it? The debt is unpayable. No matter what she does, she is still in the red.
Right. And if the debt is unpayable, then you are in a state of perpetual bankruptcy relative to your husband. And that creates a power imbalance where the concept of consent becomes almost impossible. How can you say no to a man to whom you owe a debt that can't be paid even by swallowing pus? You are permanently leveraged.
And the text reinforces this deity-like status of the husband with what we call the prostration hadiths. We're looking at citations 11 and 12 now, reported by Ibn Majah and Ahmad.
Right. The Prophet is reported to have said, "If I were to order anyone to prostrate to other than Allah, I would have ordered the woman to prostrate to her husband."
Now, for those who might not know the theological weight of that, prostration or sujud is a massive deal in Islam. It's not just bowing out of respect.
It is the ultimate act of worship. It is the physical lowering of oneself to the ground, putting your forehead to the floor. In Islamic theology, it is reserved exclusively for the Creator. You do not prostrate to kings, you do not prostrate to prophets, you certainly don't prostrate to statues. It is the definitive line between man and God.
So by saying the husband is the only other theoretical candidate for this act,
it effectively elevates the husband to a quasi-divine status within the household. He is the barrier between her and God. He is the closest thing to a God on earth for her.
Which segues us into the spiritual stakes. Because in this text, the husband isn't just a partner or a provider. He is the literal gatekeeper to the afterlife.
This is where the fear mechanism kicks in. Citation 36 is terrifyingly simple. Indeed, he is your paradise and your fire.
Think about the psychological weight of that. In modern spirituality, or even just modern individuality, we tend to think of salvation as a deeply personal journey. It's between me and the divine. I do my prayers, I do my good deeds, I get my reward. My spouse is just a companion on the journey.
But here, that relationship is entirely mediated. It's conditional. If the husband is displeased, the path to paradise is blocked. It doesn't matter how pious you are individually. If the governor isn't happy, the gates are closed.
And it's not just about his displeasure on Earth. The text introduces these cosmic rivals. This was one of the most fascinating and frankly bizarre parts of the deep dive for me. Citation 38, narrated by Mu'adh ibn Jabal. We are talking about the Houris.
The celestial maidens of paradise. This is where the text gets into metaphysical jealousy.
So walk us through this. What happens if a wife upsets her husband here on Earth?
Well, according to this hadith, the pressure becomes supernatural. It states that if a woman harms or upsets her husband in this world, his future wives, the large-eyed houris in paradise, they call down a curse on her from heaven.
They can see what's happening.
Apparently. And they say, may Allah kill you, for he is just a passing guest with you and is about to leave you and come to us.
May Allah kill you. That is the curse coming from heaven because a wife, nagged him, burnt the dinner?
Harms or upsets, it's very broad. But look at the framing there. He is just a passing guest with you. It frames the earthly wife as a temporary obstacle. She is essentially a placeholder.
A placeholder for the real wives.
Exactly. She is competing for his favor against perfect celestial beings who are actively rooting for her death so he can return to them. It creates a dynamic where the wife is constantly on probation. She is hosting a VIP guest who belongs somewhere better. It's designed to induce a state of constant anxiety and servitude. You aren't his partner, you're his temporary accommodation.
And the consequences of failing the servitude are spelled out explicitly. We have to talk about the hellfire citations. Citations 64 and 65 from Ibn Abbas.
This is the famous hadith where the Prophet recounts seeing the hellfire, and he notes that the majority of its inhabitants were women.
And naturally, the text asks why. Is it because they were murderers, thieves? Did they worship idols?
No. The text says it is because they are ungrateful to their husbands. They deny the good the husband does.
That feels incredibly disproportionate. Eternal fire for ingratitude, for complaining.
But in the logic of this text, it makes total sense. If the husband is the quasi-divine governor, then ingratitude toward him is a proxy for ingratitude toward God. So spiritual damnation is tied directly to domestic dissatisfaction.
This puts a theological gag order on any woman who might be unhappy in her marriage.
Completely. If you complain, if you say, I'm not happy with how you're treating me, you aren't just having a marital squabble. You are risking eternal fire. It weaponizes the afterlife to silence complaint in the present life.
So we have the governor versus captive dynamic. We have the physical debt of pus and blood. We have the spiritual ultimatum of paradise or fire. Now, I want to bring this down to the ground level, the day-to-day reality, because this is where the tribal context of the 7th century really crashes into the 21st century.
It centers on two main things, availability and mobility.
Let's start with availability. We have to discuss the camel saddle hadith. This is citation 11.
Laid out.
The text says, even if he were to request her for himself, meaning intercourse, whilst she was sitting upon a camel saddle, she should not refuse him.
Now, the camel saddle is significant here. In a tribal context, if you are on a saddle, you are packed up, you are moving, you're in the middle of a journey or a difficult task.
Yeah.
You are in public, effectively. It is a precarious, uncomfortable position.
It's the least convenient time imaginable.
Exactly.
Hmm.
The instruction here is that his sexual desire overrides whatever immediate task, journey, or discomfort she is experiencing. There is no, not right now. There is no, I'm busy. There is no, I'm exhausted.
From the traditionalist view explained in the text, this is about preserving the social order, right? The argument is that if a man's needs aren't met immediately, he might fall into sin outside the marriage. He might commit adultery. So to ensure marital stability and protect his chastity, her availability must be absolute.
Which places the entire burden of his sexual morality on her body. It says, I cannot control myself, so I must control you. But strictly legally, this returns us to the captive definition. Look at section 52 of the text. It explicitly discusses whether a wife is obligated to serve her husband with cooking, cleaning, domestic labor.
There's actually a debate among classical scholars on this, isn't there?
There is. Some classical scholars said marriage is for companionship, not service. But Schumann, the author here, lands on a very specific conclusion. He says it is obligatory to serve him. And look at his reasoning.
He cites, she is a captive, and the captive and slave have to serve.
There it is again. The justification for domestic labor, doing the laundry, making the dinner, isn't we are building a life together or acts of service are my love language. It is you are a captive and captives work. This is the legal framework of the text. It's not romantic, it's statutory. You are labor.
And this statutory control extends to her movement outside the house. The text is very strict about where she can go. citation 46 and 12, talk about guarding herself in his absence. But it gets very specific. Citation 12 says she should not remove her clothes outside her husband's house.
In the 7th century tribal context, this was protectionism. Women were viewed as protected property of the tribe or the husband. Unveiling or undressing in a strange house, even a friend's house, was seen as a breach of that ownership and honor. The woman was the vessel of the tribe's honor.
So the husband effectively owns the physical space she occupies. She cannot just roam around freely.
Yes. And when you apply this today, along with the instruction that she shouldn't leave the house without permission, you are directly contradicting the modern human right to freedom of movement. We view movement as a basic, inherent right. This text views it as a privilege granted by the master.
The friction is undeniable. You have a text demanding a woman stay within the domestic sphere to protect the lineage and honor of the husband, and you have a modern world that says a woman is a free agent who can walk out the door whenever she pleases.
And Schumann doesn't shy away from this at all. Remember the introduction. He explicitly says we have become accustomed to Western liberal choices. He knows this is a conflict. He isn't trying to harmonize Islam with modern feminism. He is drawing a line in the sand. He is saying, this is the ancient order. Take it or leave it.
So let's summarize the conflict as we see it in this document. We've gone through the authority, the physical expectations, the spiritual stakes. On one side, we have the traditionalist logic of order.
Right. This view says that for a family to function, it cannot be a democracy. It must be a monarchy. There must be a single leader. The man is designed for that leadership through intellect and patience, according to the text, and he pays for that privilege with his wealth. In exchange, he gets absolute obedience. It's a rigid structure, but the argument is that it creates a cohesive, stable unit where everyone knows their role. No confusion.
And on the other side, we have what we might call the analysis of autonomy.
This view looks at the text and sees a literal system of servitude. It sees the language of slavery master, captive, slave being used to define a wife. It sees the threat of hellfire and the imagery of licking pus being used to coerce submission. It argues that this hierarchy obliterates the agency of a woman, reducing her to an instrument for the husband's pleasure and service. It argues that a stability built on the subjugation of half the population isn't stability, it's oppression.
It is a stark contrast. There is very little middle ground provided in The Righteous Wife. It demands a hard choice between these two worldviews.
It really does. And as we close, I want to leave the listener with one final thought, a question to mull over.
Go for it.
We talked about all the costs, the pus, the obedience, the confinement, the curses from angels. But the text also promises a reward. Citation 48 states that if a woman prays, fasts, guards her chastity, and obeys her husband, she will be told to enter paradise, through whichever of the gates of paradise you wish.
That's the golden ticket. Freedom of entry, any gate she wants.
Exactly. It sounds like ultimate freedom. But here is the question. If the definition of obedience required to get that ticket involves accepting the status of a captive, if it involves the willingness to swallow pus, if it involves erasing your own autonomy to ensure his pleasure,
I see where you're going with this.
is the cost of that ticket to paradise the forfeiture of your existence on earth?
That is a heavy question. Is the price of the afterlife the absolute cancellation of the present life?
That's what the text seems to imply. You trade your autonomy now for your freedom later. And the question for every listener is that a trade you are willing to make?
Well, on that note, we are going to leave you with that thought. This has been a deep dive into The Righteous Wife by Mohammed Schumann. Whether you see it as a divine blueprint for order or a manual for subjugation, the text certainly speaks for itself.
Indeed it does. As always, verify the sources, read the footnotes, don't just take our word for it.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next deep dive.